Have you ever heard a building scream? Not creak, not moan, scream. That's what locals in West Virginia swear happens inside the Trans Allegheny Lunatic Asylum, a massive stone fortress in the middle of nowhere, once home to thousands of patients. A place so haunted by suffering that even the walls seem to remember. This isn't just another abandoned hospital. This is the largest hand-cut stone building in America, second in the world only to the Kremlin. Its endless corridors stretch for miles. Its windows stare like dead eyes. And for more than a century, the asylum wasn't just a hospital. It was a cage, a laboratory, and sometimes a grave. When it opened in 1864, the asylum was designed for just 250 patients. Fresh air, light, gardens. Its founder believed in moral treatment. But the dream rotted. By the 1950s, over 2,400 people were crammed inside. Hallways packed with the sick, the poor, the unwanted. Schizophrenia, depression, alcoholism, epilepsy. If society didn't know what to do with you, they sent you here. And once you entered those iron gates, you rarely left. The treatments were worse than the diseases. Ice baths that dropped body temperatures to near death. Electroshock therapy without anesthesia. Restraint chairs where patients sat for days. And then came the lobotomies. Doctors in white coats sliding steel picks through the eye socket, scrambling the brain, calling it a cure. Hundreds were left as hollow shells, wandering the wards until they simply stopped moving. Locals say the screams never stopped. They echo in the long halls even now, decades after the last patient was discharged. Tour guides tell of doors slamming by themselves, shadow figures darting across rooms, full-bodied apparitions in Civil War uniforms. Paranormal teams call this one of the most active haunted sites in America. But here's the part nobody puts on the brochure. Beneath the asylum, sealed off from visitors, are basements and tunnels that don't appear on any map. Construction workers whisper about bricked-up cells. Former staff talk about special patients hidden from records. And more than one historian admits, there are parts of this building that were never meant to be found. That's why I came here. Not for the ghost tours, not for the pretty photographs, but to dig, to walk the miles of abandoned corridors alone, to see if the stories are more than folklore. Everyone warned me not to go at night. One old man at a diner looked me dead in the eyes and said, "If you hear the door slam behind you, don't turn around. Just run." So of course, that's exactly when I chose to enter. Tonight, I'm standing at the gates of the Trans Allegheny Lunatic Asylum. Behind me, the sleepy town of Weston is silent. In front of me, a castle of stone, black against the sky, its windows broken, its heart still beating. My camera is ready, my recorder is running, and my pulse is already hammering like I'm about to walk into an interview with death itself. This is where it starts. The gates weren't locked. That was the first thing that unsettled me. A building this big, this famous, usually has chains, warning signs, maybe even guards. But here, just a rusted latch hanging loose, as if the asylum itself wanted me to step inside. I crossed the cracked courtyard, gravel crunching under my boots. The asylum rose above me like a fortress, all Gothic arches and endless windows. By daylight, it might have been majestic. At night, with the moon sliding behind clouds, it looked like a cathedral built to worship madness. The front doors were bolted shut, wood planks nailed across in hasty X's. So I circled to the side, and that's when I found it. A service entrance, the door swollen with rot, but slightly ajar. I pushed it open, and the sound echoed like a gunshot through the empty halls. Inside, the air hit me first. Damp, metallic, sour, like the smell of rusted pipes mixed with something sweeter, too sweet, like old fruit left to rot. My flashlight beam cut across peeling paint, water-stained ceilings, and endless corridors that forked like veins. I stopped, clicked on my recorder, and whispered into the mic. Trans Allegheny Lunatic Asylum. Entry point, side service door. Time, 11:47 p.m. Initial impression, silence doesn't feel empty. Feels occupied. Every building has a sound. An abandoned house breathes through broken windows. A factory hums with settling steel. But this place, it didn't breathe. It listened. My footsteps seemed too loud, as if the walls were recording every move. I started with the first floor. Long wards lined with rooms that once held patients. Metal bed frames still bolted to the floor. Rusted wheelchairs tucked into corners like their owners had just stepped away. The wallpaper was the worst, faded blues and yellows, once cheerful, now curling like dead skin. I found a nurse's station. Papers still scattered across the counter, their ink blurred but legible. Patient records. Names. Diagnoses like melancholia, hysteria, intemperance. Today we'd call them depression, anxiety, alcoholism. Back then, they were reasons to lock someone away for life. My hands shook as I turned the pages. One record stopped me cold. A girl, 14 years old, admitted for rebelliousness. Another, a man in his 30s, diagnosed with religious excitement. These weren't patients. They were prisoners of whatever society feared at the time. The hallways grew colder as I moved deeper. My light caught movement more than once, a shadow darting across a doorframe, something low to the ground shifting just out of sight. I told myself it was tricks of the dark. That's the rational answer. But my gut didn't believe it. Then I heard it. A door slamming down the hall. Not a gentle thud from wind or settling wood, but a violent crack, like someone had kicked it shut. My recorder picked it up, the sound spiking the levels. I froze, my throat tight. I wasn't alone. I forced myself to speak, though my voice trembled. Unconfirmed noise, first floor, east wing. Possible animal, or something else. Silence followed. Heavy, deliberate, waiting for me to take another step. And I did. Because in that moment I knew, if I turned back now, I'd never know what this building really wanted to show me. So I followed the sound. The slam still echoed in my ears when I forced myself down the east wing. My flashlight shook in my hand, the beam jumping across cracked plaster and long, empty doorways. Every step seemed louder now, like the building wanted me to announce myself. I passed rows of patient rooms. Small cells, barely large enough for a cot. Iron bars across windows that hadn't opened in decades. Scratches along the door frames, as if nails had raked at the wood again and again. I crouched and traced one groove with my finger. The cut was deep, too deep for a patient's fingernails. Whatever made it was desperate. Halfway down the corridor, I spotted a door left half open. The tag on it was still legible, hydrotherapy room. My stomach twisted. I pushed the door wider, and the beam of my light landed on a massive porcelain tub in the center. Rust streaked the sides like dried blood. Chains dangled from hooks on the wall, used to restrain patients during treatments. Hydrotherapy. Doctors here would dunk patients in ice water for hours, sometimes days, claiming it would calm them. Others were scalded in near-boiling baths. I imagined the screams bouncing off these tiled walls, and for a second, I swore I heard water dripping even though the pipes were long dry. I lifted my recorder. Hydrotherapy room. Evidence of restraints still visible. Air temperature dropping significantly. I stopped. My breath came out wide in front of me. The hallway outside wasn't that cold. Only this room. I stepped back quickly, and as I pulled the door shut, I swear I felt resistance, like someone unseen was holding it from the inside. I moved on, deeper into the asylum. A stairwell opened ahead, the metal railing warped with rust. I climbed to the second floor. Up here the air felt heavier, almost pressing on my chest. The wards were larger and the silence sharper. That's where I found the day room. A wide, open hall where patients once gathered. Broken chairs littered the floor, their legs snapped, cushions torn. Against one wall stood a piano, the wood warped and keys yellowed with age. I reached out and touched one key. It didn't move. I turned away, then behind me, a note rang out. A single, sharp ding. I spun back. The piano was silent, dust thick on its keys. My flashlight beam trembled over it, but nothing moved. I spoke into the recorder, my voice too fast. Day room. Piano responded, unknown cause. I pushed myself to keep going. Another nurse's station. More files. These were worse. Detailed notes of lobotomies performed here in the 1940s and 50s. The infamous Dr. Walter Freeman himself once walked these halls, performing his so-called ice pick procedure. Hundreds of patients, many barely teenagers, left broken, their personalities erased in the name of science. I couldn't shake the thought. If pain leaves an imprint, then these halls must be soaked in it. A sound jolted me. Not a slam this time, but a slow, dragging shuffle. From the hallway behind me. Heavy, deliberate, like footsteps made by someone who hadn't walked in years. I turned, flashlight cutting through the dark. The corridor was empty. My pulse hammered. I lifted the recorder again, but said nothing. Words wouldn't help me now. Instead, I followed the sound. Toward the stairwell. Down. The building seemed to guide me, drawing me lower, toward whatever waited beneath. The stairwell yawned before me, a black throat swallowing the light. The shuffle I'd been following had gone silent, but the silence didn't feel like safety. It felt like waiting. I tightened my grip on the flashlight, clicked on the recorder, and whispered, "Descent to lower levels. Possible basement access. Time, 1:04 a.m. My voice cracked, thinner than I wanted it to sound. The metal steps groaned under my weight. Each creak echoed up the shaft, bouncing off the stone walls. I counted them out loud just to steady myself. 1, 2, 3. By the 10th step, the air shifted. Warmer, denser, carrying the faint odor of mildew and copper. The basement corridor stretched ahead, narrower than the wards above, the ceiling low and sweating with condensation. My light swept over pipes running like veins overhead. Some still dripped water that splashed in slow, steady beats, a rhythm that made my skin crawl. To my left, heavy wooden doors lined the wall. No windows, no handles, just reinforced slabs scarred with scratches. One bore deep gouges, clustered around the hinges, as if someone had tried to tear their way out. I pressed my ear against the wood. Nothing, just the sound of my own breathing, too fast, too loud. Still, I stepped back quick, pulse racing. Further down, I found a storage room. Shelves buckled with glass jars, their labels long since rotted away. My light hit the cloudy liquid inside, and shapes floated in the murk. Tissue, flesh, preserved fragments of what used to be human. I gagged, hand to my mouth, then forced myself to record. Evidence of preserved biological material, possibly organs. Confirm authenticity later. But I knew I'd never forget what I'd just seen. The corridor turned sharply, and there it was, a door heavier than all the rest, iron-bound, half-hidden by shadows. A warning or an invitation. I hesitated, my brain screaming that nothing good lay behind it. But my hand reached anyway. The hinges screamed when I pulled. Cold air rushed out, so sharp it made my teeth ache. The room beyond was larger, carved deeper into the stone. I stepped inside, and the beam of my flashlight landed on what looked like cells. Small square enclosures with barred openings at eye level. Inside, chains dangled from walls, rusted but still solid. The floors bore grooves, long drag marks where something, or someone, had been pulled. I whispered into the recorder, "Unregistered holding cells. Not listed in official plans. Purpose, unclear." But I already knew the truth. These weren't medical wards. They were cages. The silence pressed closer, heavier. My light flicked across the walls, and that's when I saw it. Scratches etched into the stone, not random but patterned. Circles, lines, symbols that didn't belong to medicine or architecture. My throat tightened. Ritual markings. Hidden here, beneath the asylum. And then, breathing. Not mine. Slow, steady, just behind me. I spun, flashlight slicing through the dark. The hallway outside was empty, but the sound, it hadn't come from outside. It had come from inside the cell nearest me. The chain rattled once, then stilled. My recorder caught the sound, sharp as a heartbeat. I whispered, "I am not alone down here." And for the first time since I entered the asylum, I knew it wasn't a figure of speech. The chain's rattle echoed too long, as if the sound didn't want to die. I froze, my light fixed on the cell door. Nothing moved. Nothing visible, anyway. I raised my recorder with a shaking hand. Basement level. Unregistered cells. Confirmed noise, metallic rattle. Source unclear. My words sounded hollow, rehearsed. I wasn't reporting anymore. I was stalling. The air thickened, like humidity before a storm. My flashlight beam flickered across the wall, catching more of those strange markings. Circles broken by lines, slashes cutting through symbols I didn't recognize. They weren't random. They were deliberate. I crouched, tracing one with my finger. The grooves were sharp, carved deep, not scratched in panic like upstairs. Someone had taken their time. Ritual, not accident. Behind me, a whisper. Not the kind you mistake for wind, but clear. Words. A voice right against my ear. So close I felt the breath that shouldn't have been there. "Help us." I spun, flashlight swinging wildly. The beam landed on iron bars. Empty cell. No footsteps. No shadow moving away. just the silence swallowing the words whole. I forced myself forward, deeper into the chamber. My boots scuffed against stone, and the sound seemed to ripple outward like I was walking across water. On the far wall stood a desk, half collapsed under dust and debris. Something leather-bound peeked from beneath broken wood. I pulled it free. A journal. The cover was cracked, the pages brittle but legible. Handwriting filled the margins, cramped and desperate. The treatments are not treatments. They are openings. Each incision, each fracture of the mind, creates resonance. We hold them not as patients, but as vessels. My skin crawled as I read. The entries dated back to the 1930s. The handwriting shifted from clinical to frantic. It speaks through them now. The voices gather. The seals weaken. I dropped the journal on the desk, my hands trembling. The air vibrated. A low hum, almost too deep to hear, pressed against my chest. The chains inside the nearest cell clinked, one link at a time, like unseen fingers dragging across them. I raised the recorder again. My voice cracked. Unexplained auditory phenomena. Vibrations, possible. The words cut off. My recorder clicked. Not me pressing the button. On its own. And from the speaker, a voice, not mine, whispered, "You hear us now." I staggered back, nearly dropping the device. My pulse hammered in my ears. The journal lay open on the desk, pages fluttering though the air was still. Symbols filled the margins, repeating over and over. Circles, runes, shapes that burned into my vision. Then came the footsteps. Slow, dragging, from the hallway behind me. They grew louder, closer, deliberate. My light hit the corridor, empty. Still, the sound continued, inching nearer. I pressed my back to the wall, breath shallow. The journal snapped shut on its own, dust bursting into the air. The recorder clicked again, capturing every second. I whispered, "This isn't just history. Something's still here." And I realized the worst part wasn't that I was hearing them. The worst part was that they were answering back. The footsteps stopped just outside the cell. My light wavered across the bars, catching only dust and stone. But I knew I wasn't imagining it. My recorder was still running, the red light blinking, capturing every heartbeat, every rattle. I forced myself forward, deeper into the chamber. My boots echoed too loud, bouncing back as if the walls were answering me. The journal I'd found burned heavy in my bag, its pages full of madness that suddenly didn't feel like metaphor. At the far end of the hall, another door waited, smaller than the others, but locked with a thick chain. The metal glinted in my light. My gut screamed to turn back, but my hand was already reaching. I pressed the recorder close to my mouth and whispered, "Unmarked chamber, lower level. Secured with chain. Attempting entry." The chain fell loose in my hands. Not rusted, not snapped, just fell, as if it had never been fastened. My breath caught. The door creaked open on its own, the sound dragging through the dark. The room inside was circular, stone walls scarred with deep carvings. My light traced them, spirals, intersecting lines, symbols that matched the journal. The markings weren't vandalism. They were ritual. In the center of the floor, the remnants of a circle were still visible, drawn in some faded substance. Chalk? Salt? Ash? The lines were broken now, smeared, incomplete. I crouched, running my hand over the grooves. The floor felt warm, though the air was freezing. My flashlight flickered, dimmed, then steadied again. I lifted the recorder. Possible ritual chamber. Evidence suggests containment, not treatment. That's when the voices started. Not whispers this time. Louder. Dozens of them at once. Overlapping, crowding into my head until I couldn't tell where my thoughts ended and theirs began. Some begged. Some laughed. Some screamed in languages I didn't know. I clutched my skull, trying to shake them out. The recorder hissed, spitting static. Then, through the noise, a single voice cut clear, calm, and sharp. "Finish it." I staggered back, almost tripping over the broken circle. My flashlight beam swept across the room, and for a split second I saw faces in the walls. Pressed into the stone, eyes black, mouths open, moving in sync with the voices. I blinked and they were gone. But the air still pulsed, thick with sound. I flipped the journal open with shaking hands. The page I landed on matched the room. Drawings of a circle, instructions scrawled in frantic handwriting. Salt. Fire. Blood. Seal must be maintained. If broken, it calls. The lines on the floor weren't vandalized. They'd decayed, worn down by time. The seal had failed, and that's why I could hear them. The voices swelled, shaking the walls, dust raining from the ceiling. My recorder clicked again, capturing the roar. I shouted over it, my own words lost. Containment failed, ritual incomplete. The journal nearly flew from my hands, pages tearing as if something wanted them gone. I clutched it tight, heart pounding, breath ragged. And then, silence. Sudden. Absolute. I stood in the middle of that broken circle, the recorder still blinking, the journal pressed to my chest. My ears rang, my pulse deafening. In that silence, one thought settled cold and clear. Whatever had been held here was no longer bound. And it had noticed me. I should have run. Every instinct screamed at me to get out while I still could. But instead, I opened the journal again. My flashlight trembled in one hand, the leather binding heavy in the other. The handwriting was nearly illegible, jagged lines scrawled across the margins. The patients are vessels. Their screams are resonance. Their silence is the door. My throat tightened. I flipped to another page. The lobotomies were not mistakes. They were sacrifices. Each incision, each fracture, released more of it. We fed it because we had no choice. I whispered into the recorder, my voice hoarse. Journal confirmed suspicion, patients used as vessels. Treatments were ritual in disguise. Purpose, containment, not cure. The chamber vibrated. A low hum crawled up from the floor, rattling my teeth. Dust sifted from the ceiling in steady streams. I backed against the wall, clutching the journal. Then I saw it. On the opposite wall, the markings I'd taken for random scratches shifted in the beam of my light. They weren't random. They formed patterns. Symbols that matched the journal exactly. Half faded, but still there. I traced one with my free hand, the stone warm beneath my fingertips. My flashlight flickered, and for a split second, the symbol glowed faint red. And that's when the cell doors rattled. Not one. All of them. Iron clanging in rhythm, chains whipping against stone. The sound grew louder, faster, like applause from something unseen. My recorder hissed, then a voice burst through, layered and wrong, speaking in perfect unison with the rattling, "Join us." I dropped the recorder. It hit the stone, still blinking, still recording. I scrambled back toward the door, but the air pressed heavy against my chest, slowing me. Shadows spilled into the chamber, stretching long across the floor. Not cast by my flashlight, but moving on their own, twisting, writhing. They gathered at the broken circle, filling the gaps in the lines as if completing it. My stomach dropped. The journal's warning echoed in my head. If the seal fails, it calls. The shadows pulsed once, and the hum deepened into a roar. I covered my ears, but it wasn't sound. It was inside me, shaking my bones, rattling my thoughts. Faces flickered in the dark, eyes hollow, mouth screaming, pressed against the air as if trying to break through. I forced myself to grab the recorder, my knuckles white. Documenting unexplainable phenomena, shadows forming at ritual site, possible manifestation. My voice fractured, every word nearly drowned out by the roar. Then, silence again. Sudden, the shadows froze. The chain stopped. For a heartbeat, nothing moved. Then the journal in my hand snapped shut, pages slamming like a gunshot. My flashlight dimmed, nearly dying, before flaring bright. On the floor, carved into the dust where the circle had broken, new words had appeared. Not scratched, not drawn. They hadn't been there seconds before. Finish what we could not. My breath caught. My hands shook. The asylum wasn't just haunted. It was waiting. And somehow, it had chosen me. The words on the floor glared up at me like a command. Finish what we could not. I stared, my chest heaving. Dust still floated in the beam of my flashlight. Yet the message was clear and sharp, carved into the stone as if by an invisible hand. I whispered into the recorder, though my voice shook. Unexplainable writing appeared on chamber floor. Phrase reads, directive, not warning. The journal lay heavy in my grip. I flipped through its pages, frantic now, my fingers smudged with grit and sweat. Sketches of circles, diagrams of symbols, lists of ingredients. Salt, fire, blood. Again and again, the handwriting repeated those three words, as if the doctor who wrote them had been desperate to make someone understand. A passage caught my eye, underlined so many times the paper nearly tore. The entity beneath cannot be destroyed, only bound. The vessels keep it sated. The ritual keeps it sealed. If the circle breaks, it will claim the one who enters. I swallowed hard. My voice cracked as I spoke into the recorder. Confirmation. Doctor believed ritual was containment. Failure means possession? Sacrifice? The chains clattered again, cutting me off. This time, they didn't just rattle. They pulled taut, snapping against the stone as if yanked by unseen hands. My light caught one strap lifting off the ground, hanging in midair before dropping with a slam. The hum returned, low and steady, building in my chest like a second heartbeat. The walls vibrated with it. My flashlight flickered, dimmed, then surged bright enough to blind me. And then I saw them. Figures. Dozens. Lined up along the walls of the chamber. At first I thought they were statues, shadows cast by tricks of the light. But they swayed, twitching, their heads jerking at unnatural angles. Pale faces, eyes sunken black, mouths moving soundlessly until the roar in my ears twisted into words. You are the vessel. I stumbled back, hitting the wall, the journal slipping from my grip. Pages flared open on the floor, the symbols glowing faintly, pulsing in rhythm with the voices. My recorder clicked by itself. The red light blinked, and from the speaker came a voice that wasn't mine but used my throat. Seal it, or join them. Terror ripped through me, but beneath it, a colder realization settled. This wasn't random. My name on the fresh patient file upstairs. The warning carved into the stone. The voices in my recorder. The asylum hadn't just noticed me. It had chosen me. I crouched, snatched up the journal, flipping back to the diagrams. My pulse hammered. My eyes raced across the instructions. Salt. Fire. Blood. The steps weren't superstition, they were procedure. A system. A containment protocol. Behind me, one of the figures lurched forward, dragging its feet across the stone. Another followed. Their mouths opened wider now, sounds spilling out at last. Not whispers, not chants, but screams. I raised the recorder with shaking hands. My voice broke into the chaos. I don't think I came here for a story. I think I came here to finish a ritual. The figures closed in. The circle on the floor glowed faint red, waiting. And I understood the truth with perfect clarity. I wasn't just documenting history anymore. I was part of it. The circle pulsed beneath me, its broken lines glowing faint red. The figures pressed closer, their mouths gaping wider, screams tearing through the chamber. I clutched the journal, my hands trembling so badly I could barely hold it. Salt. Fire. Blood. The words burned in my head. Not legend. Not superstition. Instructions. My only chance to make it out alive. I dropped my bag to the floor, fumbling through it. Salt packets from the diner. A lighter. My pocket knife. Pathetic tools, but it was all I had. My fingers shook as I ripped open the first packet, pouring white grains along the broken lines of the circle. The moment the salt touched the stone, the voices shrieked louder, as if I'd stabbed them. Salt. I gasped into the recorder, my voice ragged. Step 1 complete. The figures convulsed, their limbs jerking at impossible angles. One dropped to the floor, dragging itself toward me with clawed hands. I backed away, finishing the circle with the salt, grains scattering in a shaky arc. The lighter came next. My thumb flicked it again and again before flame finally caught. The circle ignited in a pale ring of fire, crawling across the salt like it was soaked in gasoline. Heat licked my face, sweat streaming down my temples. The chamber roared. The walls shook, stone dust raining down in thick clouds. The figures screamed as the flames rose, their pale shapes flickering like shadows burning alive. Fire! I shouted into the recorder, nearly drowned out by the chaos. Circle active, containment engaged. But the last step remained. Blood. I raised the knife. My hand shook so hard I nearly dropped it. The journal's final line screamed in my head. The circle must be sealed with life's blood, or it will take its own. The nearest figure lunged, its face inches from mine, black eyes bottomless. Instinct overrode fear. I dragged the blade across my palm. Pain flared white-hot, blood spilling fast. I pressed my hand to the broken mark, smearing crimson into the stone. The reaction was instant. The circle flared blinding white. The screams rose in a single unified howl that rattled the air, shook the walls, and nearly split my skull. I screamed back, pressing harder, my blood mixing with fire and salt. The figures convulsed violently, their bodies warping, twisting into smoke that the circle pulled inward. One by one, they collapsed, shrieking as the light consumed them. Chains whipped against the walls, doors slammed. The journal's pages tore themselves apart in the fire. My recorder screeched with static before a final voice broke through, layered and guttural. Sealed for now. Then, silence. The flame snuffed out. The glow faded. The chamber went still. I collapsed to the floor, clutching my bleeding hand, chest heaving. My ears rang, my head throbbed, but the air was different. Lighter. Empty. The seal was whole again. I had finished the ritual. But as I lay there in the dark, one thought cut deeper than the knife wound in my palm. The asylum hadn't been saved. It had been reset, and I was now part of the cycle. I don't remember leaving the chamber. One moment I was on the floor, my blood smeared into the circle, the journal burning to ash. The next, I was dragging myself up the stairwell, each step heavier than the last. My flashlight was dead. My recorder hung from its strap, still blinking red. The silence was absolute. Not the suffocating silence from before, but empty. Dead air. The asylum felt drained, hollow. No whispers, no footsteps, no shadows watching from the corners. Just me and the creak of my boots on stone. I stumbled into the first-floor corridor. Dawn's gray light seeped through cracked windows, painting the walls in pale streaks. The place looked different. Still ruined, still broken, but lifeless now, like whatever had animated it was gone. I clicked the recorder. My voice rasped. Final log. Ritual completed. Entity contained. Asylum dormant. I hesitated, swallowing the dryness in my throat. Unclear if permanent. Outside, the cold morning air hit me like a slap. I staggered through the courtyard, across cracked pavement, out to the empty street. Weston was waking up. Smoke curled from chimneys. A car engine coughed to life somewhere in the distance. Normal life, untouched by the nightmare beneath their town. I collapsed against the hood of my rental car, blood still dripping from my hand, my chest rising and falling like I'd just run for miles. For a moment, the world felt real again. Safe. But then I saw my reflection in the windshield. I froze. My face stared back at me, pale, exhausted. But the eyes, my eyes, lagged a beat behind, as if they weren't mine at all. They blinked a fraction late, the way a shadow might copy a body. I slammed the recorder off and shoved it into my bag. I didn't want to hear it anymore. Didn't want to know what it might play back. Back in Chicago, the newsroom felt too bright, too loud. Phones ringing, printers spitting, people laughing. I sat at my desk, bandaged hand tucked into my pocket. My editor stopped by, raising an eyebrow at my hollow stare. So, he asked, "What's the story?" I gave him the safe version. Broken windows, peeling paint, a crumbling monument to the failures of 19th century medicine. Local legends, ghost tour fodder. I left out the ritual, the figures, the seal. Some truths don't belong in print. The article ran 2 days later, buried on page 9. Nobody noticed. Nobody asked questions. But I notice. Every night, the dreams come first. The circle glowing white, the voices screaming, the journal's words burning across my eyelids. Then the scratching. In the walls of my apartment. In the pipes. At the edge of my hearing, steady, patient. Sometimes, when I play back the recorder, I hear things I never said. Whispers. Breathing. Once, a voice using my own cadence, saying words I don't remember speaking. The seal weakens. I lock the recorder in a drawer. I tell myself it's over. That the asylum is quiet again. But deep down I know the truth. I didn't escape it. I carried it with me. The Trans Allegheny Lunatic Asylum is sealed, for now. And when it breaks again, someone else will have to finish what I began. If they're lucky. If they survive.